Our first speaker after lunch is Tracy Clarke. Tracy stepped in at very short notice and we're extremely grateful. Welcome, Tracy. Tracy's come to us from the Clinical Excellence Commission and she's currently in Clinical Systems Integration. She's going to talk to us about the human factors of the systems approach that apply to the sort of things that we're going to deep dive in with the case study. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks a lot.
Here's your clicker.
Invited even at the last minute to come down and speak to you guys. So I'm the Director of Clinical Governance. I've been in ambulance now for about 5 months, or just on about 5 months. I've met lots of you in that time, but a lot of you I haven't met yet. So really happy to be here on David's behalf. I'm going to have a little bit of a talk about patient safety and how human factors fits into that, and I think it's a really good segue into the presentation that Emma's going to give after me. And it's kind of the kinds of things that I'd like to see us take patient safety within the CSI Directorate over the next 12 months or so. The clicker's not working? Oh, hang on. Not working. Ah, there we go. Bit weird. When we come to work, I'm a nurse by background, I'm not a paramedic, but when we, as a clinician, when we turn up to work, and the reason that we chose the profession that we chose was because we want to help people. We want to make them better. We want to help them out in their times of their health crisis. We don't go to work to intentionally harm people. And so this quote from the Dalai Lama really rings true to me. Primarily, we turn up every day to work to help people, not to harm them. If we can't help them, at least we don't want to hurt them. And so everything that we do, I think, is put into a framework to help us not hurt the patients that we come across in our day-to-day work. I don't know how I flicked it. Maybe I've got it. Oh. Okay. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Daniel Kahneman or has read his book, the Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. It was on all the newsstands if you're flying in or out. About 4 or 5 years ago, it was really, really popular and on all the newsstands. He delves into the theory of how we make the decisions that we make and what lead us to make certain decisions in some situations and different decisions in other situations. It's a really interesting read if you're interested in that kind of stuff. The things that he thinks about, that he talks about mostly is cognitive bias. There's a whole lot of different cognitive biases that impact the way that we frame information that we see, that we come across, and then the way that our brain interprets that information to influence our decision making. And then there's the critical thinking part, which is the thinking fast, thinking slow. So when we're novices and so we're new practitioners, we haven't got lots of experience. We come across a particular scenario and we've got to sit there and think about it for a while. So you think back to your practice when you were new, how much longer it took you to process information over time, whereas now you come in, you see a situation, you know really quickly that this is that. So you see a patient that's got a low blood pressure, a high heart rate, they've got a temperature, they're septic. But as a novice, it might take you much longer to come across that information. As we get more experienced, we get better and better at that. So this is an example of a restaurant. So I'm going out to dinner. This is a real life example of how we might think fast or think slow in different situations. So this is a picture of dessert at the Key restaurant. It's a once in a lifetime dinner opportunity that I'm being taken out for dinner. I want to make sure that I pick the right dessert because I'm not going to get a second chance to come back and do it again. So I'm going to spend a half an hour going over the menu to sorting out which bit of that do I like, which bit won't I like, which one's going to be the best, which one am I going to be most happy with, my decision when it comes. Whereas on Friday night, we go down to the local RSL club every Friday night with my kids, and I know when we walk in there that every Friday night they're going to want A, B and C, and so we get fish and chips for my son, we get spaghetti and bolognese for my daughter, and I have the salt and pepper calamari every Friday night, and it takes us about 5 seconds to order. That's the difference between thinking fast and thinking slow. As we get better at it, as we become more experienced though, there's other risks that influence our decision making. So then there's things like fatigue, there's the environment that we work in, and I was listening to the talk earlier about the Grenfell disaster and the absolute chaotic scenes that you have to experience in your day-to-day work environment that impact how you make those decisions. I think it's really important, the rapid sequence induction checklist that we saw in one of the talks earlier. The reason those checklists exist is that we can do things really well when we practice them in simulation and in our day-to-day practice in a calm, controlled environment. But as we get into an uncontrolled environment, the scene's chaos, it's nighttime, you can't see, it's raining, there's a crowd screaming at you. We miss one part of that checklist that we know routinely, then the complex procedure falls apart and we don't have success at the end of it. So it's those times that it's difficult, that it's stressed, that we're in chaos, that it becomes more and more important to follow those checks and balances that we have. So the hungry, angry, late, tired is an acronym that we use to help with decision making. How often when you go to work have you been hungry? How often has something happened at home that you're just really annoyed at? My thing at the moment is the NBN changeover. Everyone experienced that stuff. I've had no internet all week. How often are you running late at the end of your shift and you haven't finished yet? You've got another call out, you've got half an hour to go, and you know someone's partner's waiting at home for you, you're not going to be home on time tonight. And so it distracts you from thinking clearly. Or you're tired, so you've done your 12-hour shift, you're now into overtime, you're up to 16 hours on your shift, and you're still getting call-outs. How tired are you? How well are you thinking now compared to what you were at the start of your shift in the morning? So if we look at this is a cause and effect diagram of errors. This one's in diagnostic error because that's where the background of a lot of the work I've done around this in. It outlines the system-related errors, the patient factor-related areas. There's always lots of patient factor areas. But if you actually look at the cognitive factors, they are probably the most prominent feature in most of the errors that we see through the patient safety team. They're broken down into 3 different categories of knowledge, data and synthesis. Most of them are about the way that we gather and interpret the information that we collect from patients when we do their patient assessments. And so I think that that's something that it'd be really good to just keep in the back of your mind as we move into the talk from Emma. So thank you.